you say things to ChatGPT like add humor or add a couple of analogies. It's just interesting how it can come up with interesting things that makes you think about it, in a different way. And I have a lot of fun creating content with ChatGPT.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster, it's your host, Adam Adams. And what if I told you that the next episode that you'll hear after this one was written by ChatGPT in about 3 seconds? My ChatGPT intern, if you will, didn't even have to take a bathroom break. It got this done in about 3 seconds, 2 to 3 seconds. And why this matters is that most podcasters quit because you run out of ideas, you run out of time. But what if ChatGPT did more than half your job? So I just got back from a speaker training by my coach. His name is Shaun McCloskey. Shaun is a very good speaker. He's made tons of money on stage, both for other people's companies, additionally, companies that he's partnered with other people, and his own companies. He's made millions upon millions, and he's renowned. Everybody in that speaker space, even though he's not super famous, people know that he gets real results. And I just got back from a speaker training. It was a couple of days. I had to leave the house. I had to go with everybody for a couple of days. And I learned a couple cool parts to just having a podcast, speaking on stage. And one of the things that we got into was how easy it is these days to utilize ChatGPT to do more than half your work for you. But it's not completely that easy. There are 5 steps that I'll share with you to make it a little easier for you to be able to utilize ChatGPT or other AI, because there's others out there. I just used the paid version of ChatGPT, which has been great. So step 1 is that you really have to train your AI intern. You've got to train your unpaid, maybe you pay a little bit to ChatGPT depending on what level you have. And think about it like this. If ChatGPT doesn't know who your avatar is, if they don't know who your niche is, if they don't know your personality, how you speak, it's going to be pretty tough for ChatGPT to help you to write your content. You'll probably get something that sounds like an NPR show about tax policy. So, step 1, train it exactly who you are, what your niche is, who is your avatar. These pre-prompts need to go into ChatGPT before you ever do anything else. Step number 2, what I did is I gave the 7-part system that came from Shaun McCloskey at this presentation, this 2-day, 3-day event. Here's a thing that's important. 2 other people that have made a lot of money writing movies for a living or speaking from stage, 2 other people besides Shaun also use a very similar framework to these 7 parts. And it's usually always 7 parts. So it's I guess part of what I want you to know is that it's not just Shaun that teaches this stuff. Some other well-known famous people that make a lot of money with storytelling also use the 7-part framework. So these 7 parts, they're like a podcast paint by numbers, right? It makes it easy. Even a robot can color in the lines. So step number 3, after you give it the 7 parts, and by the way, I will give you the exact 7 parts in this episode. After you give it the 7 parts to great storytelling, step number 3 is you need to ask for the whole draft episode first. So asking ChatGPT for ideas is like asking a toddler for help in the kitchen. You'll just make a bigger mess. So skip the piecemeal back and forth and give it the framework and then give it all the background and you will win the game. So make sure that you ask for the whole episode draft, not just little pieces. Step 4 is how I created the next episode that's about to happen. After you listen to this episode, the next one is about callbacks and call forwards, which actually is interesting because I'm calling forward to that. I'm calling forward right now to that episode that you're about to hear. In that episode, you will learn about callbacks and call forwards. So you are going to want to check that out. My point in sharing the callbacks and forwards with you exactly right now in an episode that's not specifically about callbacks and call forwards is to let you know that that's how I primed my ChatGPT. After doing the first few steps that I already told you, and I got to step number 4, I had to essentially teach ChatGPT about how I think of callbacks and call forwards, or whatever the episode is about. Just in my case, I have a podcast on podcasting. I help people with podcasts. I'm making podcast content, and the content that you hear in the next episode, which is used by ChatGPT, had to start by me also teaching ChatGPT my view on a callback and a call forward. I had to share with it how I think of it. I didn't want it to talk about somebody else's view. That wouldn't be authentic to me. I honestly don't think that would really help my avatar very well if I was just regurgitating content from some other podcast host. I needed it to learn my way of doing it. So in step 4, I taught it. I taught ChatGPT callbacks and call forwards. And it's able to sift through the crap because I'm just thinking off the cuff. I'm sharing with it all of the pieces. And then I'm going to ask it after to organize it into a good presentation, a good podcast episode. So step 4 is you've got to teach it about the thing. In this case, I taught it about callbacks and call forwards, which you'll learn in the next episode. And step 5 is you say things to ChatGPT like add humor or add a couple of analogies. And just for an example, here's something that came from ChatGPT on this episode as an analogy. It says, if your episode doesn't have at least one analogy about tacos, dating, or dogs, you're doing it wrong. It's interesting how it can come up with interesting things that makes you think about it, that makes you think about it in a different way. And I have a lot of fun creating content with ChatGPT. I do a lot of blogs. I do a lot of Facebook posts. And I'm starting now, after coming home from this event, I'm starting to use it more for my podcast episodes. So that's the 5 parts. You say, hey, and I want you to add humor, or I want you to add a couple of analogies, or I want you to speak from my voice, or I need you to look up a statistic that will help me to be able to illustrate this. And you'll hear that in the next episode. You'll hear how I used some stats that actually came from ChatGPT. I said, hey, I need you to look up something real and add it to this to help illustrate the point. And it was able to do it. So those are the 5 parts. Here's my actual prompt that I used. You can steal this if you want. You can use any part of this that you want. This is what I shared with ChatGPT. I said, write me a solo podcast episode for my podcast on podcasting. Then I said, my avatar, my main avatar is a podcaster who's been doing it for a couple of years, but they're not getting the results that they want. And then I also said, I've got a secondary avatar who's launching a podcast and never wants to go through the trouble that other person did by having a podcast for a couple of years that never gets results. I said, this is who I'm talking to. And I said, my niche is podcast growth and marketing. My tone is casual fun with some humor and personalized stories. And I said, structure the episode using Shaun McCloskey's 7 parts, which, by the way, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to share with that in this episode, the 7 parts. I said, structure the episode using the 7 parts to storytelling that I learned from Shaun McCloskey's speaker training. And I said, start with a bold hook and then write me a podcast episode that talks about calling forward and calling backward to be able to tease what's coming and to be able to get people to go back. And then I said, here's the benefits that I know about doing this. And that was my prompt. I sent it, and in about 3 seconds, I got everything figured out. Why does it work? Why does doing something like this help you with your podcast? It's storytelling meets the speed of AI, and your audience gets better episodes while you get your time back. So it's time for you to try this in your next episode. If it doesn't save you at least an hour, then I owe you a coffee. And when I say that, I mean maybe a virtual coffee because I'm definitely not going to drive to Nebraska to buy you coffee. But when it comes to, and that's no offense if you live in Nebraska or anywhere else, you get it. Finally, I want to say that your podcast intern or ChatGPT, your AI, is ready for you. You just don't forget to teach it who you are, or else you'll end up with a show that sounds like LinkedIn wrote it. I'll see you on the next episode.
If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of three things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.